All right, hello everyone. Hope you're having a nice day. Happy Valentine's Day. Just getting a couple things set up here and then I'll get started. Thank you to everybody who tuned in to my last live stream last night. If you missed that live stream or that process, the video is on my channel. You can always go back and watch the part one session of painting this oil painting here. What we're looking at right now is actually quite a bit more progress after the stage that I was able to get to in the live stream yesterday. So after dinner, I came back down into the studio and painted for another hour and a half. And if you watch the last live stream, let me move my microphone actually real quick. One moment here. Forgot to set this back up. I was just going to say that I came back down and worked on this for another hour and a half and really put in quite a bit more color into the painting. Let me just move my little email list text here real quick. I was going to have it at the bottom, but I forgot my microphone ends up down there. So let's do that. That looks pretty good. But anyway, last night, I went over most of the painting. I changed and developed the idea of this inside information here. While I took a break and was upstairs after the live stream yesterday, I was imagining what if there was this almost like spider web type of pattern inside of this shape. I thought that would be a bit more interesting than just a solid continuous form. And that allowed me to play with these pockets of space and really push some of the color effects in that part of the painting. So I really like what's happening now in this bottom lower section. I kind of want to keep bringing up the value and chroma down at the bottom here. My dog's barking in the background here. But I'll probably bring up some of the color relationships here so that it feels like there's this transition on the form. As we get to the lower center, it's glowing a little bit more. And it's starting to do that in those pockets, I feel like, right now, which is nice. But I changed this center area here. There was this bright yellow orange kind of light source that felt a little bit too busy, especially after I started to put in these shapes down at the bottom. So I decided to just paint over that, and it's kind of got this orb eggshell type of oval shape that I really like at the moment too. I might mess around with that a bit more during this painting session, but I'll leave it for now. And then I put in a lot more paint in the waterfall area and just built up a bit more opacity there. I really like the warm and cool contrast relationships there. It's starting to read a lot more like this sense of space and depth that I'm hoping to achieve. One thing I feel like maybe got a little bit lost after the second session last night is because there's so much chroma in the color properties from foreground to background, the space doesn't feel as deep and open as I want it to feel. So I think what I'll probably do during this live stream is adjust some of those chroma and value relationships. And then I spent quite a bit of time in this area last night too, trying to build up some information and context for this little grassy, almost like cattail piece of landscape there, piece of rock. And and then I messed around a little bit more with the sky way off in the distance. I think that's another area that feels a little bit too similar in color to what's in the foreground. So I think that's a zone that needs to be adjusted as well. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start painting. But I thought I would give you a little bit of an intro before I get started here. Yeah, I don't want to really try to predict how long this live stream is going to be because I usually run over whatever I say. So we're just going to start painting and then see what happens. All right, I think what I'm going to start with is this area in here, that glowing effect that I was just talking about. One of the things that I really was enjoying last night before I went to bed while I was still working on this painting is, it's been a long time since I've painted in a smooth, kind of soft, glazing gradient way of painting. When I was in college, I used to make a lot of artwork that had more of this sense of carefulness in the process. And while it can be tedious sometimes, I usually avoid painting this way in most of my work these days. But this has reminded me how much I enjoy these really smooth gradients of color property. All right, that's pretty bright. I think I'm going to have to drop the value of this a bit more. I have to be careful not to compete with the intensity of color that's inside of these shapes. So I'm going to use a little bit of burnt umber to eat up some of the cadmium red and alizarin chroma. There's a little bit of a glare. Sorry about the glare. I wonder if this might help eliminate some of that. Or if I block out some of the light. Yeah, maybe I'll put this foam board back up. That helps to block out some of the extra light in my studio. There we go. Looks a little bit more even now. I'm really liking this sable hair brush. It doesn't have a perfect point. It's more of like a long flat. It's a number 2 Kolinsky red sable brush. I think this is only like the 3rd time I've used it. I've had this brush for like 2 years, but couldn't really find the right paintings to use this brush on, so feels good to actually use some of the tools that I have sitting in my studio. Yeah, I think that's really starting to help create that glowing effect that I was just talking about. So I like the way this is glowing down in the center, but when I hit the edge of that darker green area, it starts to feel a little too abrupt. So I'm hoping that if I take some of my raw umber, I can kind of ease my way into that darker color there on the left. In case you're wondering what I'm using with my paint, I'm basically just using small amounts of a gel medium called oleo gel that I buy from Rublev Colors through the website naturalpigments.com. And what I like about this medium is that it's solvent free, and it doesn't have any like petroleum products in it, so it's really safe. That's basically the only medium I use these days when I'm painting, both indoors and outdoors. If I'm painting outside, I do use a little bit more Gamsol than I would ever use in my studio. I don't usually use Gamsol in my studio anymore, but if I'm outside and there's plenty of air circulation, then I'll use quite a bit of Gamsol at the start of my painting process to block things in and draw out my paintings. Alright, this is already looking a lot better. I'm pretty happy with how this is going. So if this is the first video that you're seeing for this painting, I'll give you a little bit more information about what this is for. So yesterday when I did the first live stream, I talked for a while about the card game called Magic the Gathering, which I've been playing for maybe like, I don't know, 10 years almost now. I think like 9 years. And ever since I started playing the game, I've always loved the artwork in the game. And it's been kind of like this side quest dream of mine to get hired by the company that makes the game to make at least one piece of artwork for a card at some point. And a few months ago, I was looking into their application process again, because I've applied once, and that was back in 2016, I think. So it's been a long time since I've applied. And I was looking at their website for Wizards of the Coast, who make the game, and they actually had an update on their website for freelance illustration submission, guidelines. And when I first looked into it, the application was closed, but they just opened it actually like a week ago, and it's going to stay open for I think at least another month or a month and a half. So when I saw that, I was like, you know what? Why don't I try to make a few pieces of artwork, illustration type of artwork, and put together a portfolio and submit it and just see what happens. So that's what I am. That's why I'm working on this piece. But it's unpredictable what will happen with my application. But I figured, why not share this, side to my painting practice and bring you guys along with me on this little adventure. Plus, I think it's easier, I think, if I get in the habit of sharing things as they're happening, as opposed to doing stuff and then retroactively trying to go back and like make a video and talk about an update or a new project, stuff like that. So one of my resolutions for this year is to just not overthink my content, for lack of a better word, at least on YouTube, and just be more open to sharing things as they're happening, so that's why I'm live streaming this painting process. But anyway, there's some more information about this painting. And then in terms of the actual content and idea of the painting, this was originally an idea that I came up with for artwork as like an island land card in the game. If you're not familiar with Magic the Gathering, it's a trading card game that you can just collect the cards. You can build decks with the cards and then play other people. And it's a game that my wife and I and my brother and some of our close friends have played over the last 10 years. But to cast spells in the game, you have to tap land cards to create mana, which is basically like money to pay for your spells that you're going to draw throughout the game. And those land cards are basically what they sound like. They're cards that feature artwork that are thematic to one of the 5 different land types in the game. So there's island, mountain, plains, forest, and swamp. And I was sketching one night like a month ago, and I thought, why don't I try to come up with at least one piece of artwork for my portfolio submission that's artwork for a land card. So I decided to try out island, and this is one of the 12 ideas that I had initially come up with. And I liked the this high horizon waterfall combination in this idea. And then originally in the sketch, I was just going to have it feature the water landscape, and then I was looking at the design thinking maybe it needs something to play against the horizontal lines in the painting. So I was imagining like a big planet or object floating circular kind of form, and this is where that idea kind of led. And at the moment, I don't have a clear definition for what this thing is supposed to be, but as I keep painting, I'm learning that I enjoy this feeling of temperature or energy light that it has. It feels like it's generating some sort of energy, and I think that's a pretty good kind of like standard trope for some sort of fantasy game. So originally this was going to be a land card, but as I continued to make the painting, I could also see it as like an artifact card or some other type of spell card in the game. So yeah, I don't know. If you play the game and are familiar with the artwork for some of the cards, feel free to let me know how you would interpret this artwork in the context of the game. But one of the things I really enjoy about painting from imagination is that you don't have to really worry about copying something or like this idea of accuracy. It's sort of however you want the painting to look. That's your only like real metric for accuracy. And if you have a really clear concept or like thumbnail drawing that you're trying to reference in the painting, that's a different metric for direction in the work. And I'm at a point in this process for this particular painting where all I have to do is keep adjusting things, and I can start to decide the direction that things need to go moving forward. So it's very intuitive, which it's refreshing, coming out of a lot of plein air painting and observational painting over the last couple of months, to shift gears and just build, kind of like build this world of fantasy. Right now, what I'm really enjoying is this play off of the red and green relationship in this area here. It's pretty subtle, but in person it's a little bit more vibrant. And there's this interesting sense of mystery and ambiguity, but also there's this really exciting subtle vibrancy happening between those two colors, that red and green contrast. And I kind of feel like I'm carving out space or building volume by going in and finding interesting shapes and patterns to separate from the softer green neutral part of this form. Today's been a really good day too. It's been pretty productive. I had a few things on my list that I was able to accomplish today. One of the main things I had to do today was ship out a commission painting to some friends of mine. And I got that shipped out on my way to meet a client who commissioned me to make a series of house portraits. That was back in 2022, so that's a couple years ago now. But one of the ideas we had was to preserve some of the lumber from the house. So the house that I painted was her childhood home that her parents had taken down and then had rebuilt a different home, a newer home on the same property, just like 50 feet from the original farmhouse. And I at one point I thought, it'd be kind of cool to make the frames for these paintings out of the wood from the house that was taken down. And so today, after a few years of just kind of like miscommunication or lack of communication on my part, we were able to meet up, and she dropped off some of that lumber. So I'm hoping next month in March, or at the latest in April, to be able to build those frames for her. And then that commission will be fully finished, which will be nice. But yeah, if you're watching this and you're interested in a commission, I can point you over to my website, my online shop at my website, acunaarts.com. I have a button at the top of the page for commission information and my price list. So, if you're looking for a gift for someone and you want to commission a custom painting, feel free to check out that document through my shop on my website. And if you can't find an answer to a question on that page, feel free to shoot me an email too. Speaking of commissions, actually, I just received this email from a name this guy I did not recognize. But the email seemed pretty organic still. Like, I get some of those emails that'll say stuff like, "Hello, I love your work, and it's my wife's birthday, or it's our anniversary, and I want to buy her a $5,000 painting, and I want to buy one of your paintings." And it's super vague, and I've seen tons of artists share the same exact script of an email. So those ones I know are definitely scams, but I can't tell with this email I just received a few days ago if it's legit or not. So I have to I don't know, consult with some of my artist friends and see what they think. The weird thing about the email was that this person had sent me the exact size of a painting they wanted, which was not like a standard 9x12 or 8x10 type of size. It was like, 20.5 by 24 or 23. And then they also had linked my website URL in the email, but it was the contact page of my website. It wasn't just like my homepage URL. I didn't click on it because I feel like sometimes that's a way to trigger some sort of scam, but I've never seen that before either, where someone will copy and paste your own website URL into an email. And the other thing was that they, this usually those scam emails will go to my spam folder. This one came to my normal inbox, which doesn't mean that it's not a scam, but it's unusual. But there was another component to the email where I was like, maybe this is real. When I checked the email, it looked like a regular kind of average email address. Like it was someone's name, or like it was like a nickname with a year. And yeah, I don't know. So I'm just like, I responded to the email, and then 2 days later they got back to me and said that they would be able to pay with a cashier's check. And this is the first like real red flag, I feel like. So I haven't responded to that email yet. But if you have advice on what I should do, if you think I should just leave it alone and just forget the email chain, never respond, delete it or whatever, or if you think it still could be real, let me know what you guys think. Because I definitely do not want to get scammed. Chances are I'll probably just not respond for like 2 weeks, and then if they email me again and it seems organic and natural, then I'll respond probably. But yeah, I don't know. Right now I'm definitely on the fence with that. All right, so I'm looking at the painting and looking at my computer, and it's hard to tell how things look for you, if you're watching this on your phone or a tablet or a different, a TV or something. But on my monitor in my studio, the color is notorious for being off. And when I edit my photos to share on social media or on my website, I've had to plug in my iPad and turn the brightness all the way up on my iPad to be able to check some of the color properties in my images. And then I'll bring it back into my computer, and the brightness will be super low on the computer, the image will seem a lot more dull. So it's really hard for me to tell just looking at my monitor what this looks like right now. I can't tell if it's really washed out or too bright. So if you're willing to share feedback on some of the settings for the live stream, that would be helpful too, if you don't mind. All right, let's see. What should I do next? I'm thinking... I really like how much information is starting to happen over here. I think this is really going to have to stay emphasized with variety and just different types of shapes and colors. So I'm going to grab a smaller brush real quick. I also have an update on my self-portrait painting. If you've seen some of those live streams or YouTube clips, I today, before I left to meet up with the client and ship out that painting, I toned my panel, and I just put a YouTube short video on my channel. It's really short. And you can see the color that I chose to tone the panel with. It's a very yellowish green. I'm looking at it right now, and from where I'm sitting in my studio, it looks really like chartreuse almost type of a color. I wanted it to be a lot more green, so I might have to glaze over it a second time. But anyway, because it's oil paint, it's going to have to dry for probably like 2 days before I can start working on it. So maybe Sunday or Monday I'll be able to start live streaming the painting process for my self-portrait painting. All right, let's get into some smaller lines and shapes. I have one of these really, really thin brushes that I don't use very often, but it's a Velvet Touch series from Princeton. It's a liner. This is a 20/0 size brush, so it's a really, really skinny brush. Compared to the one I've been using, this should be able to give me a much finer line. And this has a lot of paint on it right now, so I can always wipe off a little bit of extra paint if I need a thinner line or add a little bit more medium. But what I'm hoping to do is create a little bit more of an illusion of texture and variety, just to help draw the eye to this part of the image. I can't really tell right now if this is something that's organic or if I see this as more of a human-made structure or alien-made structure. I kind of feel like it could be either one at this point. But it might help if I decide, and then I can try to paint towards one of those. kind of want to try something with this phthalo green color that I have in areas of this form, but I don't want it to be too bright, so I'm mixing a little bit of raw umber and phthalo green together. And we'll see what happens if I'll put a few more marks like that in and just see what it looks like. I mean, I don't love it, but I think it does create a bit more of an interesting texture. It just makes it feel a little bit more complex, which I think is good. Some of this kind of stuff I would be referencing in like from a drawing, but I did not make this part of the painting or composition. This wasn't planned, so this is all just intuitively building in the painting process now. But it feels a little bit like just taking a chance. There's always the possibility that it's not going to look interesting and I'll have to paint over it or wipe it out, but when I have things sketched out, sometimes that can help me just have a bit more of a roadmap, and then I don't have to like be imagining or creating something while I'm painting it. I can just be looking at the idea already on paper and then just think more about color and texture and edges and that kind of stuff instead. But this is like trying to do all of that at the same time. I think it's starting to look interesting. I have to be careful not to make things look too soft and like cartoony. That's definitely not the style that I want this to have. I want this to feel a little bit more mysterious and I don't know, maybe just kind of like ominous in some way. And I was thinking this morning I might have to glaze over some of this too once it's dry all the way and make things a little bit darker and not quite so poppy in terms of the color properties. I think this, to me now, it's starting to read more like this bubbly, bulbous type of object. Like it has like this jelly type of feel in terms of the texture, which I think is kind of interesting. I think that actually is interesting. I think that might be something I'll use as like a direction. Like, okay, if I keep pushing that feeling, where could this go? I could also see this having a lot of these little tiny like webby lines in here, so maybe I'll try that out too and see if that makes things feel a little less soft. Kind of feels like these green lines are like tubes that are connecting to these red like pod shapes down at the bottom. I think that it starts to feel almost like this weird alien planting type of idea, almost like in the Matrix, you know, where they have the like human farm and all of the pods are connected through like cabling and stuff. This, to me, it's kind of starting to have that read, which is interesting. I mean, I like that. All right, let's make this darker again with raw umber and phthalo green. I use phthalo green on my palette pretty frequently, I would say, especially for studio work, like things that are painted from imagination. But occasionally I'll use it outside in plein air too. A lot of people I know use Viridian, and I have a few tubes of Viridian, but I just never seem to like, I don't know, I never got into using it. I think that's because it's not as vibrant as phthalo green, and I really like vibrant colors because you can always make something muddy and less chromatic. It's a lot harder to take a weaker color and make it feel more intense. So I think that's probably the biggest reason why I don't use Viridian on my palette, but it's very similar to phthalo green in terms of the hue. I also use phthalo blue a lot on my palette, so that's probably another reason why I like phthalo green. They just feel like, oh, they're connected, you know, like they have similarities in them pigment wise. So now I'm just going in and adding more of these little lines, hoping that creates more of a robust type of feeling in this like tube wiring texture that's in here. Excuse me. Man, it's a lot of fun to work with this green over this dark, warm color in here. This reminds me of this drawing project I did when I was in college. In one of the first drawing classes I had to take, I think my freshman year of college. And our professor, Susan Morrison, asked, or like we were required to bring in an object that could fit in our hand, something small, or like in our pocket. And my roommate at the time, Noah, he had one of these really cool bird call tools where if you twisted it, it was like a piece of wood with this metal, like copper top piece. And if you twisted the metal part, it would squeak. And it would sound like I forget what kind of bird it was, but it would sound like a particular bird. And as an object, I mean, formally, it was a really interesting looking little tool. And it was only about maybe that big and probably like, I don't know, about that wide. So I brought that in and we had to make these big, like 4-foot square charcoal drawings on paper. And you had to make a space and a composition that was dynamic and interesting, but you only could use the object that you brought in as a visual motif. Everything had to be like stacked and repeated with that object. So I made this like really busy drawing, kind of like, I think all of us in the class made similar drawings, but what was fun about that project is that you kind of started out by toning the paper and finding like a dark, probably not middle value, but you're like value 7 or something out of 9, if 9 is black. And with an eraser, you could lighten everything back up, or you could add more charcoal and push the shadows and push the darker values still. And that kind of feels like what I'm doing right now, where it's like I'm thinking of this red color as this like shadow color and trying to allude to this idea that there's wiring or cables, cords, and little lines like this that are emerging from that dark area. And it's easier, I think, if you start with the dark value and then go over that with these little lighter reveals of this object. I don't know if I even have a picture of that drawing anymore. It could have been on an old hard drive. I had this external hard drive for the last couple of years that I was in college, and then a year after I graduated, my hard drive just like stopped working, and I looked into getting it repaired and transferring the data onto another hard drive, and I think it was going to cost me like $600, so I just never did it. But I still have the hard drive. I forget what kind of artwork is on it now, though. I mean, I have some files that were saved in other places, so I have some of my college artwork, but I think drawings like that were probably on that other hard drive, and I don't even know if I have the drawing anymore now that I'm thinking about this. All right, let's see. Maybe I'll try a little bit of orange. How does that look? So is that too bright? Are the highlights in that area too bright? Maybe I can still use the orange at the top, because then it's closest to this orange glow in the middle of this form anyway. I mean, theoretically, I think it would reflect quite a bit of that orange light. So I'm gonna go with that. Okay, I think that this moment right here really helped a lot. I think it's helping me visualize the volume of this object because I want it to feel like almost like a tire, right? Like this circular shape that is a tube all the way around. So we have to think about the way that it comes towards us and recedes up and over this inside part of the tube. But for a long time, I feel like it's just been looking very flat. And now that I have this moment here, this feels like it's starting to communicate that like turning in illusion, you know, like the green color of these like weird webby tube kind of lines. That green should be influenced by the warm orange glowing light, right? So things should be getting lighter and a little bit warmer as they kind of recede into that edge of the form. It's starting to make more sense to me now. You know, and I go back and forth. Part of me is like, it would be helpful to have like little sculpture maquette models that I could light up and then photograph or paint from observation with. And then part of me is like, you know, there's a purity of painting if you're just making it up like this as you go that I also really love. But I think it would definitely help to have some kind of a physical model as an example of what light would be doing on something like this. There's moments in here that feel very graphic right now that I can't decide if I like that or not. I'm not sure how well this is working right here. Now we can go in with a darker green and make some of these a little bit higher contrast. I'm going to grab a little bit of alizarin too and make this a dark, warmish, kind of murky green. Well, actually, I should make it cooler so that the other areas seem warmer. I'm going to push the opposite here.
other brand products. With savings you can cheer for and great taste you can't resist. Pick and Save, fresh for everyone.
I should grab a little bit of phthalo blue and see if that helps pop some of these color relationships a bit better. Let's see. It's funny because I feel like if this was ever printed at the size of the cards in the game, a lot of this you probably wouldn't even be able to read because it's going to be so small, but you know, I can't help myself. All right, let's grab a little bit more blue and lighten it up. See if we can bring things a little bit closer here. think now I'm going to add a little bit of green around some of these red shapes down here and see what happens. Definitely makes it feel like these are a lot closer now, like they're sitting on the top of the surface as opposed to looking like they recede into the form. Don't know if I like that right now. We'll see. I might end up changing that in the future, but I think some contrast will be nice. Yeah, looks pretty cool. Keep going here.
Money back guarantee? You have 10 days to run your car. But coach, we're 80. You don't need to know what the car has 10 days money back guarantee. Well, you gotta learn that. 10-day money back guarantee for the win. Car back. Visit CarMax.com for details. T-Mobile 5G home internet keeps getting better. Sign $55 a month is a lot more of our best internet yet. One thing we love about home internet from T-Mobile is
All right. I'm thinking maybe we can lighten up this area. Hey Joe, happy Valentine's Day. Thanks for coming back, tuning in. Yeah, I got pretty far last night after the live stream. I came back down after dinner and put another hour and a half into the painting. And yeah, I really like where it's going now. This zone, I think, is really starting to come together and feel like something. It's taken a while, but it's starting to feel like a thing. But yeah, appreciate that. Hope you're having a great day. If you if you want to paint along and just hang out in the studio and work while I'm painting, feel free to do so. I don't know how late I'll be live streaming tonight. My brother's going to come over for dinner, and I think we're actually going to play some Magic tonight. So usually he comes over after 6, so I'll probably start to wrap up around 6. But yeah, it feels good to be sharing this process. This would have been a painting I would have just been working on off camera, and it's nice to be able to show in real time how things develop and how the idea evolves, especially for a painting like this that's just out of my imagination and has a very open, loose concept. But I've been thinking about how informative this type of painting is for things I'll do in plein air or other studio work, things that are more representational or observational, I should say. And I totally forgot how much fun it is to work in these like subtle contrasts of temperature and value and hard edges versus soft edges. And I was just thinking over the last hour that I don't know, I think this type of painting, to some extent it's like, okay, it's kind of an illustration, it's really like a sci-fi kind of art piece, but there's things that I'm doing here that like I wish I would do more often in some of my other work. So it's nice to have a refresher on this type of painting in terms of the style or the process. Maybe not subject matter, but it's getting somewhere. Definitely getting somewhere. There's something really satisfying about gradually having the brush get smaller and smaller. At this point I can just play with these minute details and relationships. Last night I was trying to kind of put in some variety in these areas of negative space in these like warm pockets, and with a bigger brush it's like you can only get so much variety, but with this teeny tiny brush I can really add a lot of tiny little shifts in color and make this feel a little bit more complicated in here, which is nice. And it's nice to also just build up a little bit more texture. I think a lot of this is probably, looks like it's getting washed out on screen, but in person there's a nice bit of texture right there. Reading your comment here, Joe. Colors really work well together. Thanks. No, yeah, it's that's one of my favorite parts right now about this too, is that green and red relationship, especially having more than one of each hue, like having a darker green and a lighter green and a darker, more dull red and a really bright, vibrant red. I think it's fun to have like 4 ingredients as opposed to just one red and one green. So I'm really happy with the way this is going now. But I think that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, where it's like, it'd be nice to have moments like that in some of the plein air work where there's more subtlety and nuance in those relationships of complementary colors, or even if it's monochromatic, just to have a lot more nuance in the color properties. I think part of the problem is I'm so not distracted, but focused on trying to capture a likeness of the scene and pay attention to the properties of the light, that my brain isn't really focused on this type of language with color. But yeah, that's where like making paintings like this every now and again it's a nice reminder of like, hey, there's some pretty beautiful effects you can get with pretty simple combinations of colors. It's just a matter of taking the time to push them into these slightly different versions of themselves, where they get less chromatic or more chromatic or brighter or darker, and to really think about temperature as this like veil of light, so if I'm thinking about the warmness of this shape illuminating the inside of like the donut Sauron wheel tire type of shape, that should shift the way that the green starts to look. And that part of the equation has been really fun to imagine and kind of, I guess design to some extent, since this is really just out of my imagination. But I'm trying to think or imagine if this was something I saw in real life, what would it look like and how would it feel? And what are the characteristics of temperature that I would start to notice too? So it's funny how it's like it's this constant cycling of information where outside or from observation I'm learning the way that light describes form and trying to be really in tune with the subtleties of color properties, And then in my studio on things like this, it's like, okay, now I have to employ all of that information and hopefully come up with things that feel convincing, But then you hit a point where it's like, wow, look at that warm glow that happens if you really turn the volume up on some of those effects, or some of those color properties. And then that can inform what's going to happen outdoors again. So it's this really beautiful cycle of information. And I think that's also where, like, I don't know. I think having a painting practice that incorporates imaginative techniques and observational techniques, I think is going to remain to be very inspiring and rewarding for me as an artist. So I'm really, I feel like when I step back and think about my painting journey and where I'm currently at, I'm really satisfied and excited about the future, because I feel like I've seen the benefits of painting from observation and doing, plein air painting events, and I've gained a lot of really valuable experiences through taking my process outside of my private space. And then I've seen the benefits of painting from imagination, and really trying to exercise my memory when I'm painting like this, because it's like I don't have this object in reality that I can look at and document or study or, portray. So I'm happy. I'm really just, I don't know, overall I feel very satisfied to be at this point where it's like, okay, I can lean on these different ways of painting and I can just keep bouncing back and forth, and who cares if I make studio paintings that are maybe a little bit more conceptual than some of the plein air paintings I make, or if I'm making, observational plein air paintings that are pretty straightforward in terms of the idea, and then to do stuff like this where it's intended to be an illustration, it's nice to feel like you can bounce around between genres in painting and not feel like you have to just pick one and your whole career has to fit under one umbrella of within painting. So I don't know, I think this conversation has been on my mind a lot over the last 2 years, and it's nice to really realize that like you have to give yourself permission. I think I was fighting this this internal conflict of like imposter syndrome. It's like, well, do I really feel like I'm a plein air painter, or do I really feel like I'm a studio painter? Like, coming out of graduate school, where I spent basically like 4 years just painting in the studio. Occasionally I would go out and paint in plein air, or I would go to like a life drawing group, but most of the time I was just painting out of my own imagination. And then like after COVID and moving back to Wisconsin and getting into plein air painting as like a career opportunity, all of a sudden I like was flooded with this joy of remembering how much I missed observational painting. And I think then it was like, well, it felt like people wanted me to just pick a lane and stay in one lane, or maybe I was just assuming that's what people were going to want. But right now I feel like, what? I like to paint weird stuff like this, and I like to play Magic the Gathering, and that's a bucket list thing as a artist and as a creative, is to make artwork for the game. And this is the only way I know how to try to open that door, is to make artwork that can be seen through the context of that game. And what's going to happen, which is what always happens, is that whatever I make in paintings like this will seep into what I'll be doing with my plein air, ideas or palette ideas or mark making ideas, and then it'll seep into other studio work or drawings that I'll be making, and everything just starts to coexist and cross-contaminate, and I think this is also where I just feel very fortunate, because I feel like I've realized that for me, I need to have like a diverse way of thinking, let alone of working, through different mediums and techniques. And I don't think I'm unique in that way. I think most people probably feel that way, but I've met quite a few artists over the last few years who are full-time painters and working artists. And, one of the things I noticed through a lot of their work is that there's a consistency or cohesiveness to their portfolios, and that's a very conscious thing that we have to decide on nowadays. It's like, well, what's my style, or like what's my brand, or what's my look? And I think because I was lucky enough to go to school for art, I spent a lot of time talking about process and talking about ideas and talking about influences and talking about techniques and the history of painting. And I had the time to sit and talk with really intelligent people, who are way more intelligent than I am, and they helped me kind of find a vocabulary to communicate what it was that I was interested in painting about, but also to understand paintings and to talk about, what a painting is doing visually, and how that then informs my life in other components, or other areas of my life. And I feel very fortunate to have had those experiences, and I can lean on that experience when I'm starting to feel trapped in my own process, or I'm starting to feel stuck with a painting. So it's an interesting like world of possibilities if you're a painter, especially today, with the way that things are connected and the way that communication happens. We're really fortunate to have so many tools to be able to meet people and share our ideas and share our voice and connect with people. I mean, I feel that way. I mean, I know that some people maybe don't feel that way or don't have the same freedoms, but I feel very fortunate that that's part of the life I get to live. To be able to do this and just bring people into my studio and show you what I'm doing in real time is really cool. Kind of a weird rant to go on, but you know what? That's part of the process too. I mean, getting back to this painting, I'm really liking the accumulation of line. I think that's a term I constantly feel like I'm saying when I'm talking to other artists or teaching workshops. It's like this idea of mass, or this idea of dimension and volume and things taking up space, and it's fun when we think about that idea through the element of line. One of the drawing methods that I was taught while I was in graduate school, that I had to teach in my own drawing classes while I was in grad school, was this approach called searching line, which it looks a lot like scribbling or gesture drawing, but essentially you're building up what your subject is through an accumulation of line, and you're feeling your way around the surface of your drawing, board or paper, and with only lines you're trying to convey dimension and volume and value shifts, and some of these other characteristics of the subject. But what's really eye-opening about that process is that drawing and painting, at least to me, it's like it becomes very simple, in the idea that if you can think about what you're doing as a mark or making a mark, if you put your drawing tool down at a point and you start to move that tool around until you take that tool off of your paper, you've created a single line, right? And there's so many different ways to make a line. In terms of description, you can make a short line, you can make a long line, you can make an organic line or an energetic line or a quiet line or an architectural line or a wide line, a skinny line. It's like there's so many different ways to make those marks, and it starts to simplify, at least to me, that starts to simplify the idea of form, and the illusion of form. And some of what I'm doing in my painting is moving very, very small lines in different successions of direction, to create this illusion that something is moving vertically or horizontally, but in other ways I'm playing around with very short, teeny tiny lines, which we could call dots, and I'm just moving that color around a certain part of the painting. But at a microscopic level, it's a pretty simple process or idea, And in drawing, when we start to shift our focus on the element of line, I feel like that starts to create a process that's easier to envision, especially for new students to drawing, or people who haven't drawn for a very long time, or maybe never learned this way of drawing. I think it gives people a sense of confidence where it's like, actually, this isn't that complicated. We're just making lines, and depending on how many lines we make can change how light or dark that area or that shape will start to feel or appear, So anyway, all of that, is stemming from this visual moment here where it feels like there's this mass of information, but so much of that is actually the process of knowing when not to connect the line, and when to suggest that there's a shift in direction or volume, or like the weight of the line to make it wider or skinnier. And it's an interesting process to experiment with. It's very tedious, obviously. I mean, I'm working with a very small brush, and this is the third painting session now. But to be fair, I did not know that it was going to look like this when I started the painting, because the drawing did not look like that. But I'm really digging this weird, webby, like tubular, I don't even know or tube-like, that might be the right word, type of shape here. But I think this is my favorite stage of a painting, at least one that's like this. It's very illustrative, it's when you feel like you've got the idea somewhat resolved. You can kind of see the direction that something is going, but now it's just like tweaking little details. It's like when I teach, I always use the analogy of cooking, and when you're working on a dish and you've made it, whether or not you've made it before, and you're testing it while it's still cooking, a lot of times you can, sample it and then go, it's not salty enough, or it's not sweet enough, or it's not spicy enough, or it's not blank enough, and then you'll go and you'll grab an ingredient and adjust the whole flavor of the dish. And in painting and art making, I feel like it's very similar, where it's like, well, it just needs this little bit of sharpness here, or this little bit of warmth here, or this little bit of coolness, or that contrast between these two things needs to be more extreme or less extreme, and so on. But for me, with a painting like this, it definitely feels like, it definitely starts to feel like that at this stage, because it's like, I didn't even know what I was trying to cook, but now I want to make something that tastes like this, and I want it to taste even more, spicy, or whatever the flavor is. One of the things I really like about this area right now is that there's a shift in clarity, or like resolution. There's this really explicit moment here where they're pretty straightforward. It feels like I'm really trying to show you what you're looking at, and then as we move away, our imagination can kind of fill those details in, and we can decide, well, it's probably the same stuff, whatever this is, just continued around and out of frame. And that's a lot more interesting than if I were to like go through and make this type of language continue all the way up through the top, you know? So it's nice to be able to just pick an area and then create that point of context for the rest of that form. But the other thing I was going to say is because there's a like atmospheric kind of softness about these areas, I really like that character in those shapes, and I don't want to over sharpen things, but I also don't want to like under sharpen things where it's not quite interesting enough. You know, I think because I've done so much here, I should pick one side or the other and maybe creep it up just a little bit so it's not symmetrical on both sides. Like maybe I'll bring a little bit more of this like wormy green stuff over to the right side slightly. I don't really want to do that at this very moment though, so I'm going to leave it alone. I might change my mind about that anyway. I don't know. It's almost starting to feel like little eggs, like pods. Like this giant thing is about to lay these red eggs somewhere. That's how it's starting to read to me. Maybe I should lighten up some of that edge of those shapes actually too. Let's try something here. On screen this seems a little bit brighter, but in person this doesn't really pop the way that I would like it to. I keep rolling backwards just to see it from a distance and decide if I like something or not, but it's funny because like when I started these green lines, the first few I was like, I don't know about this. I don't think this is actually going to help the painting. And then 30 minutes later, it's like, okay, I kind of like the direction of this. I feel like that happens to me constantly. Just put a line down and go, well, maybe that was a mistake. But I also feel like if you follow an idea all the way through, you know, what do you have to lose? If you don't like it with the first line, then you might not like it at the end after 30 minutes of continuing that idea. So you don't really lose anything. You just were correct on what you thought in the first place. But you do allow yourself the possibility that it might be better than what it was before if you follow that idea. And I feel like for me, usually it's the latter that happens. It's like, man, I'm glad I stuck it out and kept pushing that visual idea because I really like what it does for the painting now. So I'm just, I'm trying to create this glowing effect down at the base of these ovals. So I need to go in and lighten up this goldish color here at the bottom, but I don't want to just outline the entire oval. So I'm trying to keep it on the bottom half of the shape. Maybe I need to like blend it out a little bit at the top.
gotta learn someday. 10-day money-back guarantee for the win. CarMax. Visit CarMax.com for details. Oh, watch your step. Wow, hold the seat. Alright. Alright. It's the perfect place in Tim Hortons. Now we have to press play it. Make sure you start with all five covers your whole house. Even your really, really
Right, a little bit over here.
Who's looking for a deal? Well, Cousin Chef has a better deal just for you. Cousin's new $10 meal deals are now available online only. Choose between a 7.5-inch ham and provolone, turkey breast, or veggie sub, a bag of chips, or regular fries. Regular sauce and beverage and cookies at cousinchef.com.
Okay, kind of like that. I think that's interesting. Though I'm going to bring a little bit more vibrancy at the bottom. What time is it? All right, I think I'm going to keep painting for 15 more minutes and then I'll sign off for today. Because I have a hot date waiting up for me upstairs. My wife is upstairs. And then I can help her with dinner and set things up for our game night tonight. This is definitely feeling like those like 70s, 80s sci-fi art illustration vibes for me. A few months ago, I ordered a play mat for when we play Magic, and I spent like 2 weeks just trying to find one that I liked because, you know, I knew I was going to look at it a lot, and obviously I care a lot about how stuff looks as, you know, being an artist. So it took a long time to find one that I was like, okay, I can live with this playmat for however long I'll have it, hopefully forever. But, you know, it took a couple weeks, and I was looking at probably like 300 different mats before I decided on the one that I have. But at one point, I almost bought a Frank Frazetta playmat, like one that has his artwork printed on it. I think it was a Lord of the Rings image when he illustrated the Lord of the Rings, which was pretty cool. But, you know, I was also looking at some of his other illustrations, and when I think like 70s, 80s illustration, that's the kind of artwork that I'm picturing in my mind. But a lot of the artwork, I think, for Magic is digital illustration, and there's some really cool stuff that people make that's digital, but I feel like there's just a different type of feeling when you have a physical painting for this type of artwork. I don't know if it's like some of the challenges that come with physical mediums and materials, like you have to live with certain things. It's hard to undo or move backwards in the process, as opposed to digital work. You can just keep duplicating or reversing things that you don't like. And I think obviously you don't have that like physical real texture in the artwork either. So I don't know. I definitely would pick the physical stuff if I had to pick one. kind of want to try adding a little bit of cadmium orange in here. I don't know if you can even see that on screen. What's nice about pushing this area now too is that it kind of allows me to play off of that corner to determine what needs to change in the other areas. You know, like when I started today, I felt like all of this was way too saturated or chromatic, but now because this is super vibrant and the contrasts of complements is so eye-catching, I feel like it allows this to feel more serene, which was part of the initial idea for the painting. Check the chat here. Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Joe. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I'm glad that you enjoyed hearing, some of the rambling about my plein air, the plein air process or those events, and it's nice to be able to connect with other artists on those fronts. Because I feel lucky that we have that community and that infrastructure for opportunities. Definitely is something that I know, like some of the professors I had in school could have benefited from having that, those events when they were starting out in their careers. So I feel really lucky that timing wise, it just, it's like right place at the right time for certain opportunities. We're going to try... Yeah, kind of like that. Making this warmth in here a little bit more noticeable. But thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. It'll be a fun night tonight. I think hopefully we'll have time to maybe play 2 games of Commander. My brother, I guess, has been sick the last week, so I'm hoping he feels better tonight. We haven't hung out with him for probably like 2 weeks now at this point. Or, well, let me think. Maybe about a week. I saw him before last weekend, before the plein air painting retreat that I went on last weekend. He has this vampire deck that he plays with that he bought when it first came out, and I think it was like the second set of like pre-constructed full Commander decks that you could buy. Because Commander is a relatively recent format of Magic that's grown in popularity a lot over the last, 5 or 10 years now, but in 2017 when they made these like ready-made decks that you could just open and start playing that format with, I think the deck was like maybe $40 or $35, and within like 2 or 3 years the value of the deck that he bought skyrocketed to like $150, and it sort of sat at that average price. Like just the one commander card that he has like sat at that price for the last like 8 years or however many years. And you know, he's been able to play that same deck and win a lot of the games, you know, having only spent like $40, which is crazy. But yeah, it should be fun. I feel like, I don't know if he's going to play that deck. He has a second deck that he's been working on. I don't know if he ever finished building it though, so we'll see. I think I'm going to try my Stranger Things deck. That is pretty weak, but you know, I've got a bunch of different cards of characters from the show that I recently bought and want to try out and see what they do in the game. But it's a fun game. A lot of people say it's a combination. It feels similar to chess and poker, because it has that like limitless of gameplay that chess has. Like you could, you know, there's so many different ways to play the strategies of chess, and Magic is a lot like that too. But it's like poker because you're drawing cards and people don't know what you're holding in your hand, and you can, you know, use politics and play sort of like the mystery part of the game to your advantage sometimes, which is a lot of fun too. But I'll probably end things here in a few minutes. How long has this stream been? 2 hours. That's, man, time flies when I'm live streaming while painting like this. Hopefully people are enjoying watching some of these live streams. It'll definitely be nice to have, just for future reference, if anyone's ever interested in the way that I make some of the paintings. This is starting to look like an eclipse up here a little bit, which is kind of nice. But you know what? I think, well, let's see. Actually, I kind of want to soften this red over here. This seems a little out of place over here. We're going to try to tone this down just a little bit. All right, I think I'll probably end here. Thanks for tuning in. Thank you, Joe, for hanging out in the chat too while I was live streaming. I hope you have a great rest of your day and weekend. If I don't see you on a live stream over the weekend, I don't have plans to live stream over the weekend, but you never know. Sometimes I just find myself with a couple of hours, and if I'm going to work on this painting, I might try to share that process with all of you. But if you're watching the recording of this, thank you for checking out my process and this particular project that I'm working on. If you're brand new to my videos and my artwork, I hope you'll take a minute to check out my website, where you can learn a lot more about my journey as an artist and see my portfolio and a bunch of other information there. So if you have any questions about anything, feel free to leave that down in the comments, or if you have feedback on anything that I talked about in this live stream, let me know. But that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you have a great day. Thanks, everyone. See ya.